what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. If you've been watching us over the last few years, or at least over the last year, you probably know that I have really done a hard pivot on my feeling about audiobooks. This isn't one of those things where I think that they're not reading, because they certainly are, but I used to not be someone who liked them because I found it very difficult to focus on the story while I was listening to them. I would always be listening while I was doing something else. Within the last year, I have really taken to audiobooks. I made a previous video about my top 5 audiobooks, and today I wanted to talk about 5 more that I'm really, really happy with having listened to, and the reasons why for each. Many of these books are books that I have listened to for my book club, so I'll have a little bit more to say about those. And the first is Come Fly the World by Julia Cook. This is a non-fiction book about the Pan Am airline industry and its rise and fall, and traces the voices of lots of the women who were stewardesses with the airline from the very beginning, and how they reached that point, and how their progression through all different parts of the wars that were going on during that time, and the political climates, and how they came to the profession and how the profession changed. I really like to listen to nonfiction audiobooks. I feel like it helps me focus a little bit more. It feels less like I'm reading a textbook that way if someone is telling me a story, and this is told in a wonderful narrative style. Some complaints from my book club about this, and some other folks had listened to the audio as well, but were that the stories didn't necessarily give you a cohesive and chronological narrative. It kind of jumped around from point in time to point in time. And I can understand how in print that might be difficult to follow, but I happened to really enjoy listening to that. It was like somebody was telling me the story and kind of keeping track of when in time everything was going on, and I really didn't need to. So it didn't bother me nearly as much having listened to it, that whole timeline piece and the jumping around. So I think that's commendable for this. This book was read with a very matter-of-fact tone, so even the more dry or dull piece of it where the author is talking about describing the business and management tactics of Pan Am and the way that they sort of changed policies over the years, that's read in a way that makes it feel part of the story. So the narration in this is very well done. Next was also a book that we read for book club at the end of 2021, which was Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This book is not a traditional narrative. It's sort of told in the style of a screenplay. That's how it's formatted, and I almost wish that I had read the print version as well in companion with this, because sometimes it's hard to envision what the author's trying to say without seeing it printed ahead of you. So this is just read the way it would appear on the page, and the book, like I said, is written as if it's a screenplay. The author is so deeply steeped in being in the world of acting and trying to become Kung Fu guy that he cannot remove his real life from the tone of a screenplay or from a performance. The narrator of this book did an excellent job at capturing both of those tones with similar styles, but sort of distinct enough in the reading that you could tell when he was switching back to his parents growing up and trying to make it in Chinatown, and then him experiencing his real life and moving through that. There's just enough difference in the narration with also the cues from the stage directions that are printed in the script that help you differentiate. So this was really interesting to have read aloud. It was kind of like going to a first reading of a play. Very neat. If you've already read this book in print, I would encourage you to listen to the audio and let me know what you think. It's a totally different experience, I feel like, from reading the book in print. Also on this list is Followers by Megan Angelo. This is a book about the dangers of social media and influencer culture, which I feel like with the rise of new forms of social media every day and the way that they're all linking to each other and the way that people are trying to buy them out and all kinds of social media stuff in the media, this is a very relevant book. This follows 2 roommates as one of them aims to make it really, really big on social media, and also flashes into the future where everything is totally different and you have like a chip implanted with your brain that connects to something on your wrist that basically you can like take all of your pills in your mind by thinking about it, and it always knows where you are. But the character it follows is living in a society where everything that they do, from sleeping to brushing their hair to like cutting up vegetables at dinner time, is televised for people to watch. So it's essentially LA has turned into just a city of entertainment, which is just people's lives basically being live streamed to the rest of the populace. And it's the confluence of that person in the future and these two women from the past who are sort of millennials trying to make it big on Instagram and on the internet, and upsetting a lot of people as they do. The narrator of this book differentiates the characters incredibly well. She has a tone of voice that remains the same, so it's not that she's definitely doing different voices for each of the characters, but what she is doing is giving each of them a different effect. One of the characters is sort of softer and more down here and tepid and afraid and not really sure what to do, even though she's really smart. And the other one has just like this saccharine, sappy, sassy, annoying tone of voice that's a little bit more nasal than everybody else. And then the character from the future sounds kind of like she has been hit over the head and she's just watching plain black and white TV and everything is boring and muted for her. So all of them have the same voice, but they don't have the same tone of voice. It's very well done. I think it lends itself excellently to different points in the story and to just demonstrate the depth of those characters' personalities, which is something that I don't think you get from the text. And that's hard to do, right? With a good piece of writing that you're going to read with your eyes, you should be able to get the feelings of those characters just from looking at it, from reading it, and hearing them in your own head. And that's potentially what happens when you read this book, but it comes across incredibly well and very successfully in the audio. And the sun is coming out here just in time for me to mention the last two. The first of which is The Wangs versus the World by Jade Chang. This is a book that we read for book club. It is about a story of a billionaire immigrant family who lose all of their money in the dot-com boom. And they are now on a big long road trip from Bel Air, California, out to the Catskills in upstate New York to go and live with the one child in the family who might still have some money left. It's definitely a book about sort of claiming your American future, whatever that means, how we handle falls from grace, how we deal with failure. It's very, very powerful, if not a little bit long. The thing I appreciated about this book was the fact that I don't speak Mandarin. And so for all of the passages in this that were printed in Mandarin, if I had been reading them and they were written out phonetically for me to read using English characters, I wouldn't have known what they said. And I appreciated that the author was able to read those to me. And even though I might not have known what they were saying, just the fact that I could hear some of the text in the language it was meant to be heard in was so powerful. I'm not someone who is bilingual, so to understand the idea of the switching back and forth within the same sentence or within the same thought for these characters was really neat to witness, because that's not something that I do daily. And I was appreciative that the team that made that book recording happen found a narrator who was able to speak both languages to really do those passages justice and to do them correctly. If you're looking for a book to keep you company on a particularly long journey, although perhaps not a road trip across the United States, this is definitely a book that I would consider. And finally, the audiobook I listened to most recently, which was The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This is a set of short stories, and each one of these was read by a different person, which is not something that I had heard before, and I really appreciated because it took you from one story to the next and took you out of every story and into the different one with a new voice. This book focuses on issues of race and with a distinct focus on what it means to be Black in the United States, and unbelievable job from all of these narrators for just working their way through some really hard topics. There's one particular story about a young woman who has a traumatic event in her past that somehow connects her to having a uncertain and not negative relationship with the Confederate flag. And it's really remarkable to just hear that story read so well. It gave me a really uncomfortable sense of ickiness, as Cher Horowitz would say, having to listen to it. And so I can only imagine that having to read it out loud, perhaps more than once, to get all of the takes right, it just is an uncomfortable experience for a narrator. There's not a story in this book that didn't engage me, particularly the last story, the longest of them all, which is the story that gives the book its name, is just incredible. This is A+ work. I gave this book 5 stars. It was something that I could come back to over time. That's sort of the nature of short stories for me, is I'm able to pick it up and put it down very easily because there's not one particular narrative that I need to follow. When one story ends, I can pause and come back to it later on. And this is just so impressive. I'm not sure that each of these stories would have felt as different for me if I was reading them in text. Having the different voices helped to break that up and really let each story shine on its own. So there are 5 more audiobooks for you to try if you are audiobook inclined. You can probably find the other video somewhere around here if you want 5 more, if this is the first time you're coming to a audiobook video here on our channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having lovely weeks and lovely lives. Anything that you want to know about us is of course in the description, and we will see you very soon.